We talking right now?
A radio show host in Seattle called Paul Gallant.
You are definitely living in the hindsight world today, Paul.
Do you feel there's been a consistent theme with the interceptions?
I think every interception really has a different story.
I was just kind of curious what Paul gets to say.
You got grow, mother. Are you kidding me?
Paul Gallant, what the hell is wrong with you?
Hello and welcome aboard another episode of the Gallant Says podcast, available to you live at random times to be determined at my choosing on twitch.tv/Gallant Says. We're on youtube.com/Paul Gallant. I am Paul Gallant. You can also hear this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. We've got some Mariners fans joining me in the YouTube chat. Austin Sauce, Life and Sports Talk with Jake. Good evening. We'll talk a little bit about who the hell I'm going to be rooting for starting tomorrow. But first, let's talk about what we saw in Monday Night Football, a game that the Kansas City Chiefs were able to come back from down 17-0 to beat the Las Vegas Raiders 30-29. It's the Raiders' second loss this season after having a 17-plus point lead. Not looking good for Josh McDaniels and the Raiders. But that's not what everyone's talking about, or at least was talking about during this game. Of course, there's some conversation about whether or not the Raiders, who had just scored a touchdown, and if they kicked the extra point, would have tied the game if they should have gone for it on that 2-point conversion. They didn't get it. They ran the ball up the middle. They gave it to Josh Jacobs. I actually think it was the defensible move. Josh Jacobs was running all over Kansas City all game long, and you just had a defense on its heels after rushing the passer and then running 50 yards downfield to get in position for the eventual 2-point conversion call. Obviously, they didn't get it, but there is this deal across the NFL, and specifically with those people who follow it on Twitter, where everyone seems to be in lockstep with one another about what the correct call actually was. I saw some logic about how, hey, if the Chiefs had stopped the Raiders, well, now they're just going to run their 4-minute offense, and the Raiders are never going to get the ball back. By the way, the Raiders eventually stopped the Chiefs. They got the ball back. They didn't score. Had they gotten the 2-point conversion, oh, well, the Chiefs are just going to go in the 4-minute. We can either kick a field goal or score a touchdown. Or, okay, maybe the Raiders going to stop and maybe you just want to score more points. But again, that's not what everyone's talking about. I don't want to get into a back and forth with the analytical community. And I know that word gets thrown out a lot in a way to, I don't know, perhaps point at analytics and say, yeah, I just don't feel like fucking learning them. But let's just focus on the roughing the passer call. Some interesting tweets that I wanted to share with you, courtesy of a couple of people that I like on Twitter. Let's take a look at Ross Tucker. Ross Tucker tweeted this. In a poll, what bothers you more? Bad roughing the passer calls or watching backup quarterbacks? Would you rather deal with some BS roughing penalties like the one on Chris Jones or watch Skylar Thompson, Bailey Zappi, Cooper Rush, etc.? The NFL believes these are the two options. And in case you missed it in tonight's Monday Night Football game, late in the first half, with Vegas driving the ball at their own 46, Derek Carr got sacked by Chris Jones and stripped by Chris Jones, who also recovered the fumble. But the play was whistled dead because I guess Chris Jones somehow roughed Derek Carr while taking the ball away from him. And I guess the way that he roughed him is by landing on him. Some comments on twitch.tv/Gallant says or youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Austin Sauce says, you can't tackle quarterbacks anymore. Simple as that. Life and Sports Talk with Jake says that play was BS. They shouldn't have called roughing the passer. Just pitiful. It's a 285-pound Chris Jones falling to the ground, LOL. What do you expect them to do? Jump over him mid-fall? Those plays should be reviewable somehow, some way. Well, maybe. That would also perhaps make games take way too fucking long if we're going to review all of those roughing the passer calls or what could have been a roughing the passer call. Personally, I'm of the belief that football's a team game, and while quarterbacks obviously have a lot more importance to that team's success than the majority of other positions on a football field, shouldn't the next person step up in a game that's inherently violent? It's bullshit that quarterbacks get to play a violent game under a separate set of rules. And I feel like, to pull a line from Lethal Weapon 2, revoke the diplomatic immunity that the South African diplomat has. It's kind of bullshit that a quarterback is playing under a different set of rules. They are handsomely compensated for their services. You can't bump into them on their way out of bounds. You can't bump into them when they slide. A love tap to the helmet's a 15-yard penalty too. You can't fall on them too hard. It's a dangerous position. We all get that. The great ones are compensated for it. If they get hurt, team game. Backup quarterback should step in. Some backup quarterbacks are good. Frank Reich stepping in for Jim Kelly back in the 1992 playoffs with the Houston Oilers taking a 35-3 lead on the Buffalo Bills. And Frank Reich, much like he did when he was a quarterback at Maryland, where he led the greatest comeback at the time in college football history, does the exact same thing. Get a good backup quarterback. I mean, that's a solution, right? Jeff Hostetler, I think I might have mispronounced his name, in for Phil Simms, I believe, in a Super Bowl too. Like, sometimes someone comes in. Life and Sports Talk with Jake asks, if Tua didn't get that concussion, would this still have been called? It's a good question. There was an article that got retweeted during today's game. It's from the Miami Herald. And let me transition over here so you guys can read it. Mike McDaniel updates status of Tua Tagovailoa, Teddy Bridgewater, and the Dolphins' injuries. Because there's some controversy about roughing the quarterback this week. First off, you have Grady Jarrett bringing our Lord and Savior Tom Brady down a little bit too hard. Honestly, you touch Tom Brady, you should probably go to jail, be executed on the spot. So, I don't have a problem with that penalty. Tom Brady is a holy one, and if a mere mortal were to touch him, that person's hands should be disintegrated from their body. Come on. We all know this. But in that Miami Dolphins case, Tua Tagovailoa was ruled out of Sunday's game against the New York Jets after that concussion that he suffered / back injury that he suffered against the New York Jets. But then on Sunday, a spotter saw Teddy Bridgewater stepping in for Tua Tagovailoa against the Jets show some symptoms of a concussion. So he's in the concussion protocol through Wednesday. The Dolphins overreacted there. I think their spotters were looking for anything that could perhaps make a quarterback look like he's in pain or something like that. So Tua, we'll see when he gets back. Teddy Bridgewater, though, we have no idea if he'll get back. We don't even know if the guy has suffered any sort of brain injury. So teams are getting a little overprotective. And I get it from a liability standpoint. I get it from a safety standpoint. I get it from a keeping your best players healthy perspective. But at the same time, that's what the next man is supposed to step up for if an injury happens. Do these roughing the passer penalties really stop a quarterback from getting hurt or hit? I mean, people are obviously easing up now. They're not diving below the knee. They're trying not to tap a guy on the helmet. They're trying not to land with their full body weight on top of a quarterback. But are those things preventing Tua Tagovailoa from getting hit the way that he did? I don't really think so. It's a violent game. Stuff like this happens. I'm not justifying it. I feel bad for the referee, Carl Sheffers, who made the call. It's a tough spot to be in. It's a bad call. He's just doing what he's being told, though. Protect the quarterbacks. Why are you protecting Derek Carr? A great question, but he's just trying to protect the quarterbacks. That's it. And he's going to get all the shit for this. He was getting a ton of shit from Kansas City Chiefs fans, except for on a play where they felt Patrick Mahomes, who was thrown down to the ground, should have perhaps drawn a roughing the passer call. Maybe that's for the sake of consistency. I don't know, Chiefs fans. Maybe you should be a little bit more honorable on that front. That's just me. What do you do about this? There's an interesting tweet from Albert Breer, who I don't generally agree with on a great deal of things, really anything. He tweeted, you know what's a big problem? Jerome Boger, who was the referee that made the call of Grady Jarrett roughing Tom Brady yesterday, with zero willingness to fall on the sword and admit he made a mistake. And he only has to talk to one reporter. How come refs are subject to so much less accountability than players or coaches? Well, they're not paid as much. They're not full-time employees for the most part, at least to my knowledge. I think that's part of it. But I think the other thing is, too, it's a tough job. I'm not saying that referees missing a call should be excused all the time, but I'm also not Ben DeBose on Twitter that's saying that it's the ref's fault when a team loses a game on a regular basis. It's a hard job to do. I'm not going to fault someone for missing every call, but that one was particularly egregious, and you can't fuck that one up. And yet, that's what happened. Some more comments. NFL's literally telling us they value quarterback lives more than the other. Yep. Hashtag all footballers matter. Continues to say NFL is going to be the next NBA. You can't touch anyone in a physical game. Accidents happen. I get it. Yeah, I'm with that line of thinking there. If a quarterback gets hurt, the backup should have to come in. It is a team game at the end of the day. So those were some takes that at the very least had me thinking, okay, well, maybe it is a one or the other trade-off in the NFL's eyes, and maybe they should look at an alternative. I don't really know how you hold a referee more accountable other than taking him out of the league, giving him less assignments, not letting him in the Super Bowl, telling him it's time to go, firing him. but it's really hard to train up a referee to take the place of the guy that isn't living up to the job he is being paid to do. But we did see some great tweets out there after this went down. Let's start with one. This one was from Michael Wilbon, who you might know from ESPN's Pardon the Interruption. He tweeted this. Let me go further. It's okay to sling Mahomes to the ground, but not Brady and not Derek Carr. I'm just asking, but pretty soon it ain't gonna stop with a question. Ooh, damn. Well, why don't you go a little further? I don't know. I feel like you're pussing out here a little bit, Michael Wilbon. Just say what you're saying. Because you said it. It's not like you hit it. It's not like you're being subtle. It feels like there's a statement being made there about there being a double standard for Patrick Mahomes versus Derek Carr and versus Tom Brady. There should be a double standard from this perspective. Patrick Mahomes is a lot more elusive. He is a lot more mobile. And I know some people are going to be saying, well, hey, Paul, come on. Michael Wilbon's saying this because he thinks that there's a double standard for a black quarterback versus a white quarterback. I don't buy into that. I think the NFL would love to see Patrick Mahomes out there for every single game, seeing as he is the future of the league and at this point in his career is probably a more talented player than Tom Brady and is clearly always has been a more skilled player than Derek Carr. The guy's also exceptionally mobile, and I do think that when it comes to Mahomes that he's treated a little bit differently because of that. Should that be the case? That's a good question. Maybe a mobile quarterback and a non-mobile quarterback should be treated the same, but that would make things like ruling a hit on a quarterback sliding difficult. That would make, in addition to that, plays where a quarterback's maybe scrambling to the sidelines and he ducks out of bounds, fakes ducking out of bounds, fakes sliding. I feel like there are a little dicey areas on the field for a quarterback where you should be allowed to hit him and hit him as hard as you fucking can. And yet, here we are. The league just doesn't seem to allow for it. I wonder if we continue to go in the direction of minimizing all contact with quarterbacks. Another interesting take, because, something big happens in the middle of a sporting event and everyone's got to talk about it or bring it back to them in their own way. But this one's a doozy. I didn't hear this part of the broadcast, but multiple people tweeted annoyed thoughts about Troy Aikman's commentary on what we all agree on was a garbage roughing the passer call. Here is Rachel Shalom Lobdell, who is the editorial director at Fortune magazine. And she wrote, a truly awful call, but let's not overlook Troy Aikman's sexist comment. My hope is the competition committee looks at this in the next set of meetings as we take the dresses off. She was not alone. Jason Page also tweeted this. He is for the back page. Is he a coworker of mine? Interesting. Did Troy Aikman really just say what I think he said? Did he really just say that it's time for the league to, quote, take the dresses off, end quote? The 60s called, they want their chauvinist back. Seriously, ESPN, do better than that crap. I think we're trying too hard here. I think we're trying too hard. I mean, look. I know that sometimes we see something and we're like, I want to do the right thing. I want us as a society, stuttering Stanley here, as a society to move past things that are considered archaic ways of communication, sexist, racist, etc., coded language and stuff like that. But I don't know, sometimes can't we just look at language and accept it? Can we call it wussification, pussification of the league? Softening it taking the dresses off. I mean, look, nothing against the ladies or anything like that, but is that not an accurate statement of what's sort of going on with the league here? Things are getting a little bit more proper, primp, perhaps, I don't know. They're getting to a point where it's not resembling tackle football anymore. It's becoming flag football. I feel like we look for things to get outraged about. And I mean, I feel like on Indigenous Peoples Day, which is what Columbus Day is now called by some, although I think there's like a couple of Indigenous Peoples Days during the United States calendar. I honestly don't know. I just saw a tweet about it earlier. I responded to that Rachel Shalom Labdell saying, you're overlooking Chiefs fans doing the tomahawk chop on Indigenous Peoples Day. Shaking my head. Hashtag canceled. I'm joking, of course. We've got a couple of people responding, hey, it's Columbus Day. And I don't know if they're joking around or being like every single character on that one episode of The Sopranos where they get pissed off about a protest at the Columbus statue on Columbus Day. That's my second favorite episode of The Sopranos, by the way. The episodes where they get mad about really dumb stuff and go off the deep end and lose their temper and get in fights over it. There's something about it that makes me laugh. Some comments. Is the NFL ever going to make reffing better? Is there no room for innovation with more reviewable penalties and quick calls from New York? There probably is, but I think the big problem that gets in the way of that is that you still have to have the referees make the decision themselves. And if you continuously say, well, New York's just going to step in and clean up your mess, New York's going to need to hire more people, and we might get to a point where what's the point of the guys that are actually on the field? I don't know what you do from an innovation standpoint other than pay these guys more money, make them full-time jobs refereeing, have an academy for referees. It's not easy to be a referee these days. At the lower levels, you're going to have to deal with pissed off parents and pissed off kids and not even getting paid anything just to get to a point where I think you could even, I don't know, break into a Division III football game being a referee there. Like it's a job that does require experience, and the only way to get experience is if you work your way up the ranks. And I think for the NFL, I mean, are you just going to throw a first-time referee into the middle of a game, expecting him to not fuck up in the same way that we saw Carl Sheffers and this referee crew fuck up tonight? No, you gotta give him time. You gotta give him a little bit of leeway, a little bit of patience here. Easier said than done. I think we always online have never necessarily the easy and right solution, and yet we think that it's just right there in front of us, so we get pissed off about something. I would have liked to actually see a solution for it. The only solution I can think of is that make all players that are on a football field covered by the same rules. I'll joke and say, go even further. Don't let a quarterback slide. Don't let a quarterback run out of bounds. Don't let anybody run out of bounds. But the serious thing is that the quarterbacks here should not be playing under a different set of rules. I get it that you're scared of injuries, but it's part of the game. Is a football game really that unwatchable if a great quarterback isn't out there? It shouldn't be. You should have alternatives. You should have a good backup. You should have an alternative plan. You should be able to run the ball. You should be able to do something else. Twitch.tv/Gallant Says is how you can comment live on the Gallant Says podcast. You can also join on YouTube, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. What's funny is the retired referee on the broadcast really didn't say much about that call. LOL. Yeah, that's kind of the John Perry experience. I would love to, at some point in time, hear John Perry just say, that call is a product of a rule that sucks. And they'll never do that. Instead, they generally go the same direction as the referee's calls on the field. We have a comment from Stone Jam 206. Pick a side, Paul. Houston or Seattle? Let me explain why it's difficult for me to do that, as the Astros and the Mariners play one another on Tuesday afternoon in Game 1 of the American League Divisional Series. And by the way, congratulations to the Mariners on advancing after an amazing comeback from down 8-1 against the Toronto Blue Jays on Saturday night. Wasn't able to watch it. I saw at one point on our text chat, and I was getting sporadic signal while at ACL, a festival in Austin City Limits. I remembered that I had gotten texts saying, oh, this is embarrassing from the people that are on my Seattle sports group text. And then all of a sudden I went over to a TV and I noticed that the Seattle Mariners had won. So then I looked at my phone and I was about to tweet about it, and I found out that my phone had been pickpocketed. I lost my phone at ACL. I still don't have it back. I'm hoping to get it tomorrow. We might do a deep dive at some point during the week on thieves and who the best thief in history was and how pickpocketing happens. I had it in my pocket. It was zipped. It was buttoned. It was still stolen. I like Mariners fans a lot. I feel like over the last 2 years when I was up at 710 in Seattle that we bonded. I also, though, feel very close to the Houston Astros given that I was there for a successful World Series run. I was on the air until 4 a.m. the night that the Astros won their first World Series. It was a lot of fun. I had champagne on the air. Really, it's probably my favorite memory in this industry. And having covered that Houston team from when they were at their absolute worst, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, to a point where we weren't even talking about them on the radio for a while, and seeing them progress to where they are today, the most dominant team in baseball, 5 straight appearances in the American League Championship Series. We'll see if they make it a 6th. 3 World Series appearances. We'll see if they finally can get a second World Series this year. If I had to pick between the two, and there's a gun to my head, it's not easy. I'm not going to lie. But then you think about who's paying you. And you think about where you live. You think about where you're probably going to live for the rest of your life. I don't see myself leaving Houston anytime soon. I'm curious as to how my heart will be feeling once this game begins. I know that I was joking when I went to that Seattle Mariners, Houston Astros game, wearing the half Astros, half Mariners shirt, which pissed off everybody. I'm just fucking around a little bit. But I will say, like, my heart is legitimately torn on this one as someone who is no longer a diehard baseball fan for any franchise. I grew up a Red Sox fan. The Red Sox smeared Terry Francona in 2011 after they had that epic collapse down the stretch, and I kind of became a baseball free agent. It didn't really help that the Houston Astros were so bad when I first moved down here that I kind of just fell out of love with baseball. But then the Astros got good. And then I moved to Seattle, and the Mariners were supposed to be bad, but the first year I covered the Mariners in the pandemic, they were frisky. And then last year was awesome. I know they didn't make the playoffs, but they had 90 wins. It was a good team. Was it 90 wins? I forget off the top of my head. To be fair, I got canned with about a month to go, so don't really remember the specifics of the end of that season. I just remember I had fun and felt like this year was going to be the season where the Mariners maybe take that next step. Austin Sauce. Pretty hard to root for a cheating franchise, too. It makes sense. I'm a Patriots fan. You think I give a fuck? I love winning. I love a team that'll do anything it takes to win. And by the way, and I said it before up there, and now I don't have to worry about, getting an angry mob of my own coworkers coming after me. A lot of other teams were doing it. They all deny it. There's no investigation into them. Does that mean that they weren't doing anything? I don't believe that for a second. Yankees were doing shit. Dodgers were doing shit. Red Sox were doing shit. Colorado Rockies were doing shit. Texas Rangers were doing shit. Was it as new installs the Astros? No. You still have to actually deliver in the spot, but yeah, sorry. The cheating thing doesn't bother me at all. It really doesn't. But what am I rooting for tomorrow? Again, hard decision, but I feel like, and it's a shame because I actually love this website and I love the shirts that they have, but a website might have made the decision for me. This t-shirt pisses me off. Sorry, Simply Seattle. I saw this in a tweet retweeted by John Hopperstad, who works for Fox 13. He tweeted out, "This shirt just out from Simply Seattle is perfect, especially the trash can in place of the U. as the Mariners get ready to take on the Houston Astros. And if you're watching on twitch.tv/GallantSays or youtube.com/Paul Gallant, there is a blue shirt with teal, in teal, the word Houston, but instead of a U, there's a trash can. There's a rocket flying in the sky. And then it says, "We are a problem." Houston, we are a problem. Couple of things here. First off, I don't know if you want to be doing that yet. I think you'll want to win some games against this team before going that route. And, first half of the year, things were actually a little bit more close. I think the Mariners won 3 of 4 series to open the year against the Houston Astros. And the Astros did sweep them once. But then the Mariners had won 14 in a row, and the Astros come to T-Mobile Park, and they swept them. And then they handled them the next time that they played, though the series was a little bit closer. I don't know that you want to be saying right now that you are a problem to a team that, let's be honest, has owned the Mariners. They have. The Astros have really owned the Mariners. And then on top of that, as someone who has lived in Houston, whenever I hear someone say, "Houston, we have a problem," I get so fucking pissed. I hate it. You hear it all the time. It's a shame, because I guess that's maybe the only pop culture reference that folks working in national media can think of when they're thinking about Houston. But they go to it. And anyone from Houston, you hear that, "Houston, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem." Oh my God, you just lose it. And if I'm not mistaken, that's not even the actual line. "Houston, we have a problem" is a popular but slightly erroneous quotation from the radio communications between the Apollo 13 astronauts Jack Swigert, Jim Lovell, and the NASA Mission Control Center during the Apollo 13 spaceflight in 1970. "Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here." And then after repeating the statement, they said, "Houston, we've had a problem." I hate hearing it. I just hate regularly hearing it and seeing it out there. So this shirt that's playing off of it, maybe it's supposed to troll people like me, but it's enough to push me towards the Astros. I'm not going to lie. And look, my job's in Houston now, so it has kind of taken care of itself. I know if you listen to the Paul Gallant Show tomorrow, which you can hear 10 to noon on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 in Houston, that I'm going to play around with it a little bit before at the very end of the show I finally say, "Hey guys, I'm rooting for the Astros." Life and Sports Talk with Jake. It's going to be a good series. Pitching and offense is going to be the key for Seattle, just like the Toronto series. Houston has all the power and experience. Going to Seattle may be a problem. Man, I don't know. I don't know about that. The thing I'm most concerned about in this series is whether or not Justin Verlander is going to pitch on a level that we have seen him pitch in the postseason before. And by that, I mean like a better one. Because Justin Verlander, over the majority of his career, has not been a great postseason pitcher. Not to say he's been a bad one, but Verlander hasn't been the lights-out pitcher that we've seen from him this year, coming off of Tommy John surgery with a 1.75 ERA on the season, which is best in baseball. And on top of that, the best ERA, not just the best ERA, the most wins in the American League. I'm more curious about him. I feel like the tricky thing for Seattle is that, yeah, they got a lot of runs early on Alex Manoah in game 1 on Friday. It was just a 3-run first inning. Cal Raleigh gets the home run. But they only scored 1 run the rest of that game. The pitching did a great job. I'm not even going to act like the Astros offense is necessarily better than the Blue Jays. I'm just asking the question. You think that Luis Castillo is going to be able to do that? And then to take a look at the other side of things, and specifically, having a bit of a brain fart here. In game 2, don't forget, I mean, it's the 8th inning. There's 2 outs. Bichette and George Springer collide with one another, and it's a 3-run bloop double that saw 2 players run into one another. The comeback was great, yes, but it was aided by a flukish play. If that doesn't happen, who knows what would have happened in Sunday's game. Again, there's a lot of would have, should have, could have, all that shit when it comes to talking about anything sports related. All I'm saying is they had been very fortunate in those two games. Does that momentum carry over? Does that luck continue? I don't know. I did talk about this today as Life and Sports Talk with Jake says. I think the Mariners just have the momentum coming to Houston. Something about being an underdog. I don't know. Julio, Mitch Haniger, Ty France, all did bad. I can't expect them to continue this. Fair enough. But on the other side of things, the Astros have been pretty damn hot heading into the postseason. I would point to Jose Altuve. I'd point to Yordan Alvarez. Both of them were crushing it down the stretch. So if I got to pick between the two, picking the Astros, nothing personal. I'm not going to be a dick to Mariners fans. I would never do that. And I'm not going to be a dick to Astros fans either, and I might have some fun with both of them along the way. We'll see. But if I have to pick, it's the Astros. What else do we have to dive into? Yeah, it is kind of late. Maybe we'll save some of these other topics for the middle of the week. There's some interesting comments from Kanye West on Tucker Carlson. What is happening? What is going on? I'll tell you what's going on. Jay West was wearing a White Lives Matter t-shirt. There's also something that young people brag about that I don't believe they actually do. And a very, very prominent voice in my industry weighed in on it. So that will happen later in the week. We're trying to make this, at the very least, a nightly thing. We'll definitely be talking about the Astros and Mariners series on this podcast. If you haven't subscribed to the Gallant Says podcast already, get it wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud as well. And if you want to join the conversation live, twitch.tv/Gallant Says, subscribe today, or go to youtube.com/Paul Gallant. You can see my face in action. We put up little graphics. We put up videos. We watch things, and it's a whole lot of fun. I'm actually going to be at the game tomorrow at Minute Maid Park for the Astros and Mariners. I think it's a noon 30. That's not a real time. A 12:30 start. If you're in Seattle, it's a 2:30 start here in Houston. I can't wait for this series to start. And I appreciate you guys joining me tonight. Again, those are all those places that you can watch the show live. Twitch.tv/Gallant Says, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Thank you so much for tuning in. So long, farewell, and have yourselves a wonderful Monday night or Tuesday afternoon/day/first day of the playoffs for the teams that officially made it already, / the teams that got past the play-in.